All right, good evening and welcome to Bible study. And we are here on Wednesday night. In the summertime, we don't meet at church. We meet here and do it online. We have people who cook dinner for us during the school year at church, and we have a good group that comes on Wednesday nights. And so during the summertime, we give those people a chance to recover and all of that. And so we're going to be in 1 Kings tonight in chapter 18. I preached on Elijah on Sunday. It was Pentecost Sunday. And so we're going to follow that up. And you're going to see, I want you to see, because for all of us, our life is kind of does this at times. There's ups and downs. You hear mountaintop experiences, down in the valley so low, the idea that we have really upbeat, exciting, wonderful times, and then we have low times where we are almost to the point of suicidal. And that's true even of Christians. That's true of even some of the greatest people in the Bible. And so tonight I want you to be able to see that and see what some of the answers to that are, see what some of how we can, work around that and be productive and victorious in the midst of that. So after the fire comes down from heaven and burns up Elijah's offering, you have the people there, they kill off the 450 prophets of Baal, or Baal, however you want to pronounce that. And so Elijah, in verse 41, so 1841, says, "And Elijah said to Ahab, 'Go eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain.'" It's been a drought for 3 years, and this is finally the rain coming. And it says, I don't know if you've ever been through a trial where you get right to the end of it and it's the end, that there's something good coming, but it's not relief necessarily. It's almost like exhaustion that hits you. It's almost like it's over. Is it really real? Is this really going to happen? Is the rain really going to happen? And you're kind of questioning God even after you just saw this mighty miracle. And it says, "So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel." So notice, if I went on a hike and I climbed to the top of a mountain, that takes great exertion, energy. My kids love to climb up to Mount LeConte in the Smokies, and they talk about, oh man, at the end of that day, you're so tired. It's such a wonderful experience, but the next day you're sore, you're tired. And so he's climbing Mount Carmel, and it says he bent down to the ground and put his face between his knees. "Go and look toward the sea," he told his servant, and he went up and looked. "There's nothing there," he said. 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." So Elijah said, "Go tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose, a heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. So, how do you feel? Let's kind of trace your feelings, your emotions, what you go through when a big, bad storm comes with thunder and lightning and wind and all of that. So he's exhausted from the climb, tired from the 3 years of drought. And, he's been through this great challenge. And so he's worn out. And he tells, the king, you better hit the road, because now he considers himself the advisor of the king. The 450 prophets of Baal are gone. And so he's telling Ahab what to do. And it says, meanwhile, the sky grew black. I just read that. And it says, verse 46, "The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel." Okay, so he's like Usain Bolt here. You're talking about the power of God. He's outrunning a chariot is the way that I read that. And it is incredible that this man and at his age is able to do this, but it does show you the power of God in the moment. And it says, if we're going into chapter 19, it says, "Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword." He had them killed. And it said, "So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, 'May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them.' Elijah was afraid and ran for his life." So he becomes public enemy number 1. He's wanted by the law, posters on the wall, all of those things, knowing that death is, just chasing him, that always looking over your shoulder, listening to every noise, all of that is just wears on you. It's exhausting in that sense. And so he says, he's afraid. That's fear that's rising up in him. And for us, I want you to take heart. I want you to sit there and go, this Elijah, if there's synagogues full of, great portraits on the wall of these Jewish synagogues, Elijah's is up there. He's up there with Moses and David and all of these great men of faith. And it says he was afraid. And it says that, he ran for his life. It says, when he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, verse 4, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. It says he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. Okay, so he's suicidal. He said, Lord, take me, and I don't think that's an unusual prayer for people that are over, say, the age of 55 or 60. I think some people get tired of, my grandfather leaned over to me when we had Noah in 1996, our first child, and he said, I'm so worried about what life is going to be like for him. I'm sorry that he's going to have to experience all that he's going to have to experience because the world's a terrible place. That's what he said to me. He was like 80-something years old. And so, I was kind of like, man, what a downer. What a negative Nelly in terms of looking at the world. Now I'm 58 years old and my son's having a grandkid and I'm going, ooh, I'm sorry that poor Brooks is going to have to live through the stuff that he's going to have to live through and experience all this stuff. But we start getting older and we're like, Lord, it's not like suicidal, like, Jill, come kick the bucket out from underneath me. But it is, Lord, take me. I'm done. I'm tired. I'm ready to go to heaven. I want to see the streets of gold. I want to, all of that to look forward to. And when life gets really hard down here, we're like, Lord, take my life. Go ahead. Let me, especially I find myself when somebody tells me this 3-year-old's got cancer or this 5-year-old's got MS or whatever it is. And I go, Lord, I'll take their place. Just let them live. You can take me home tomorrow. I'm okay with that, And so for us, that we can take heart in Elijah experiencing the same thing. And what the New Testament tells us is that Jesus became fully human so that he could experience everything, every emotion, everything that we experience. And so he can, have compassion, empathy with us. He knows what it's like to be excluded or to be an outcast. He knows what it's like to be persecuted. He knows what it's like to have people yell and scream at you and call you names. All of the different things that we go through that make us so sad. So, all of the things that make us to get to this point suicidal. So he sits down. He's tired, tuckered out. He said, I've had enough, Lord. He said, take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. I think in certain times, Jill will tell you, Chris Caldwell becomes a different person in heavy traffic on the interstate. Not the same nice guy that different in that moment. If I'm out and I get hot and sweaty, that's what made me a good athlete, I think, in terms of, because when somebody hit me in the mouth, and I was all hot and sweaty. Oh, it's on. Nobody's going to hit me in the mouth. All that. No one's going to give me the finger. I'll take you. That kind of stuff makes you a good athlete in terms of the no quit in you. So, Patsy, you were asking about people on Zoom. That right there is Sandy Bratton coming on Zoom. So we sit here and we're looking a little bit more. Okay, so he's ready. He just lay down and he fell asleep because of exhaustion. All at once, an angel touched him, said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals in a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. Okay, so that, if I'm trying to sell candy bars, then I go, that's hangry, right? Is that, I just want to die. I just want to lay down under this, I just want to lay down here and die. It's just, life just stinks, all of that kind of stuff. Here, eat a candy bar. And then when you eat something, and I'm not saying it has to be a candy bar, but when you eat something, you feel better. When you drink some water and that dehydration goes away, you feel better. And so that's an important thing for us, is to understand, so many of us who work hard, sometimes, even though it doesn't look like it, we neglect eating or we neglect drinking something, right? And so you have that nutrition aspect is important for us, and that we need to definitely know the right things to eat and when to eat them, right? We need to make sure that we're up to date on those things because how it affects us. All right, so the angel feeds him, and then he comes back, and it says in verse 7, the angel of the Lord came back a second time, and he touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went in a cave and spent the night. Okay, so I also want you to see the importance of rest, right? The importance of overcoming exhaustion, that it is important for us to be able to lay in a hammock or sit in a beach chair or in a rocking chair on the porch of a cabin, or just to, some of my favorite times, we got the opportunity. We went to West Virginia on a mission trip, and the guy that we were there with said, hey, do you guys want to go to a fire tower? And we were like, oh, golly, we worked all day. How far is it? And he goes, it's about a 2-minute drive, and then it's about maybe 2 football fields to hike up there to it. And we're like, oh, okay. So we drove the 2 minutes, really was, pulled into a parking lot. And unfortunately, the 2 football fields were like this much. It was like this to get up there, straight up. And all the kids were like, oh, man, we'd just eaten dinner, so it was good. But sun setting, I said, it's going to be worth it. We need to climb up this mountain. And so we get up there, and oh, my goodness, the view was it was like being on top of the world. And just the idea of the breeze blowing and the sun setting, and it just kind of wiped away any exhaustion, wiped away any negativity, wiped away anything and everything, and just, breathed into you life. And the same thing happened on a Young Life trip that I got to go on when I was much younger, junior, and we went to the Continental Divide, and we were in the middle of July standing in knee-deep snow on top of this huge rocky mountain in Colorado, and it was just incredible. So I know James and Amber just got back from New York, and they talked about the sun setting and watching the Statue of Liberty and having the UT choir sing like God Bless America or something like that as they watch the sunset behind it. It's just kind of blows you away. It's just, but there are those times, and we need to set aside those times. Jimmy just signed on here, and he's in Florida right now, and, relaxing, resting, gathering steam for the things that are when you get back home kind of deal, and enjoying some time with family. So he's in a cave at this point, and I want you to hear, these are the things that we read right there in all of that. And these are the things that contribute towards our exhaustion, and then furthermore pushing us into sadness, depression, and all that. Now listen to some of these things. So he's tired and exhausted from being persecuted and from all the travel. So much of the travel there is actually long distances. And there are times, I had a friend when we lived in Knoxville who would give us a place to stay in Naples, Florida. It was about we didn't have the money to fly, so it was about a 14-hour drive with kids, and that's not with stops and everything. It's just kind of the driving part. And so by the time that we got there, it was like, Lord, take me home now. It was kind of 4 kids in a van, and Jill was like, I think there's online internet divorces that we can do now. It's that kind of thing. Is that it wears you out, the travel. And so he had traveled great distances you have to remember, Elijah traveling into the wilderness because that's where God told him to go. Hey, I'll feed you when you get there, right? And so he was kind of, being fed by the animals, the ravens dropping him food out in the wilderness, drinking from the brook. Then he says, go to Zarephath. So go to a foreign country, and he travels there. And then it says, go present yourself to Ahab. So he goes back to Samaria, northern Israel, and he's traveling there. And then it says he takes off running to Jezreel, and he's running ahead of this chariot. And then he's running from there to, 40 days to Horeb, and he's exhausted from the travel. If you know anybody who travels for a living, even if it's around the world, you go, man, it must be great to get to go all those wonderful places. And they all say the exact same thing. They always go, oh, it's just exhausting. It's just, you don't understand. I spend all my time. I have a friend that gets to go to these wonderful tropical places, and she's like, I don't ever get to leave the conference center. I don't even see the sun. We just go set up and do our thing and then go get on a plane and leave, And so the exhaustion from the travel. He was isolated at times. And this is the thing that we miss a lot of times is Jesus says the words, if you're not gathering with me, you're scattering. And so, it says in the Old Testament, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Is that what Jesus is gathering people? Jesus' church is gathering. It's bringing together community. Satan's church is scattering. It is separating, isolating, getting us alone where we will buy and believe every lie that he tells us because we don't have anybody to build us up. Patsy and Margie will go visit lots of folks in our church. And both sides of that, those people tell me. The people that got visited go, it was awesome. They came by. We saw Patsy and Margie. It was so good to see them. They really, put a smile on our face. And then Patsy and Margie come back and they're like, it was so great. We had such a good time. It was seeing everybody. And it is that community. But you will go visit some folks who are homebound and they will talk about their agoraphobia because it builds up over time and they get more and more and more set in their ways and don't want to leave their house and are afraid to leave their house. And that grows and it isolates, and it depresses us over time. It makes us sad because we don't have those people in our lives. And love is a verb. It is something between people and between us and God. So we're supposed to be sharing that. It is an activity. And, we may or may not be doing that. And if we're not, then it is pushing us further down that road. I'll say I think he had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder or syndrome or whatever it is. And what I mean by that is he's just saw, you remember in Exodus, 20, when God is giving them the 10 Commandments, is God is speaking to them out loud. And before he speaks, there's always this thunder and lightning and dark clouds and, all this kind of stuff. And the Shekinah glory always comes down, which is just amazing, glowing, bright light that descends upon the tent of meeting that they have. And Moses is there and scares the living daylights out of him. And so when God speaks, it's terrifying to them, so much so that they go, don't do this anymore. Just talk to Moses. He'll tell us what he wants us to, he'll tell us what you say, but don't do this. This scares us. And so in the same way, he's on Mount Carmel and he goes, okay, you do this. You put your bull over there on your altar. I'll put a bull on my altar and we'll see whose God answers when we pray. And God answers, theirs doesn't. And when God answers, it's not that he just comes down and goes like that. It's the heavens open up and fire comes down, burns up the bull, the altar, the rocks, the dirt, the water, the ditch, everything around it. And it's terrifying. We would go, ooh, cool. That's what we think we would have done. And really we would have peed our pants and we'd have been crying and going, oh my gosh, and running away from it. And so he's sitting there. And I think after all of that, then they killed the 450 prophets of Baal. So there's the horror of war that he's going through. And one of my great grandfather was in World War I, and when he came home, he was like a real big drinker. And people are like, what a terrible guy, drinks all the time like a fish or whatever. And they kind of attributed it to like a character flaw. And I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying, okay, so the man was in the Philippines fighting 2 years in the war, like 1909, 1910, came home, and then they sent him back to France and put him in a trench warfare during World War I. They were gassing one another, all these different horrors of the machine guns mowing people down. And he had PTSD. And so this is what Elijah has gone through. He's just seen horrible, terrible stuff. And we would say, oh man, he saw some great miracles. And it's true. But, sometimes when God answers, it's like in Hezekiah or, in Jehoshaphat's case, where God comes and kills 185,000 people with a plague. That's 2 Neyland stadiums full of people who just die on the spot from pestilence. And we would go, yay, our God answered the prayer. But at the same time, they're laying out there and the birds are feeding on them. It creates PTSD. It creates this horror. It's like what we've done to children and youth by letting them watch some of the movies that we let them watch. I sat in an R-rated movie and God just convicted me to no end. This is like 25 years ago because I'm sitting there in an R-rated movie supporting it, number one. And it was like a John Wick kind of movie. It was one of the shoot 'em up kind of movies. But I'm sitting there and it was horrible. I mean, it was just killing all over the place. I looked over and this guy and his wife were there. And they had 2 little kids that were like under the age of 5 walking around and eating popcorn and watching the movie and everything. I was like, man, the stuff that we put our kids through, that affects us in terms of depression and sadness and the stuff that we experience. He also was dealing with pressure all the time. You heard it at the end, is that the pressure of, is God going to answer or is he not? We have faith. We believe that he's going to do it. But at the same time, we're in the back of our heads going, okay, we're on TV. Everybody's watching this. We're on this mountain. Are you going to do this, God? And it's a stress. It's a pressure. And then for the 3 years, there's been no rain. It's been a drought. And everybody's angry with you because you announced it, even though it was what God said. And so nobody likes him. And so then Jezebel's trying to kill all the prophets. So there's this pressure. There's this stress that comes with it. It's difficult times. And you guys know it's if you have a little bit of money, it's much easier every day to wake up and go and do your thing. If you just trying to every single day figure out how you're going to get enough money to pay the rent and what you're going to do today, and it's only 3 days till the rent's due, and those next 3 days are not fun days. You're stressing over, am I going to come up with this $150, this $800, this whatever it is? And that stress wears on us. It frazzles that nervous system and makes us just a bag of nerves. And so he's dealing with that. He's dealing with aging issues. Big surprise. You're looking at the old man on the Bible study, right? That right now is that when you start getting older, getting ready to have my 40th high school reunion in August, I think. 40 years out of high school. I'm just glad at this point to be alive, but at the same time, we can't control some of the things like wrinkles. We can't control hair falling out or any of those things, the aches and pains and disease. And you just can't control a lot of that stuff. And he's dealing with, some of the, the issues that are out there in terms of when you get to a certain age, you're like, life's not getting better. It's not improving. It's winding down. And so I said to somebody the other day, I said, when you're middle-aged, you feel this way. And they're like, you're not middle-aged unless you're planning to live to be 116. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. But it is that aging thing is that, shoulders and knees wear out, eyes start getting, it's just your teeth start hurting and, heart issues and your feet and, whatever it might be. Just getting old. It's just your body. I sit there and I go, I played way too much tackle football. I damaged myself and shouldn't have in all those young years, The next one is, and this is the one for me, and let's before we attack that one, let's do the skip one and let's just go to miscellaneous for a second. So the things that are affecting his depression that are miscellaneous, how about the weather? For me, if it's gray outside and it's rainy, my daughter Sela loves that. So, she's going to enjoy being in the UK, right? She's going to enjoy England, Ireland, Scotland, all those things because it rains a lot over there. It's dark and dank and lots of rain and overcast and all that. And she thrives on that. I despise it. I like the Southern California nice all the time weather. I'd like to have the sun out. I love the breeze to be blowing and just to, nice and comfortable. And, it helps my countenance. It helps my attitude to have that. We have to think about there's the effects of prescription drugs, the effects of alcohol, the effects of the stuff that we're eating that we talked about earlier. There are soft drinks on the market that are shown in tests that they cause depression, that they cause us to have more of a negative outlook on stuff. And so, and then I'll add one more in there, and it's the people you hang around with. is that birds of a feather kind of deal, is that if you hang around people who are negative and down and depressed, that rubs off on us. And when we jump in, it makes it even worse. And we add to it and it just becomes a boiling cauldron. So we have to make sure that, if we're having troubles with those things, let's find somebody, because like I said, it's nice for me that I wake up next to Jill every morning, that I go to bed at night laying next to Jill, because Jill has such a Pollyanna positive attitude about everything. And I have to be careful that I'm not dragging her down, because she is such a positive person and sees the good in everything. And so it is for us, those things those miscellaneous kind of things that we can address. The other one that I kind of skipped over that I wanted us to see is, and this is some of the stress, some of the depression that we have about going to war or having to battle or having to fight or stand up for something, is the idea of overcoming evil. You've heard me say many times, the idea of if, evil prospers if good people do nothing. And so for us, it is hard. It's difficult to stand up for what you believe, to stand up for what is right in the midst of. And I hearken back to the idea of, because most of the time evil creeps in on us kind of like the fog yesterday morning. There was a lot of fog when I woke up. And fog just kind of slowly comes in, and it's at the grass level, seems like. And then it just kind of rises up, and then it's like so thick you can't see. And so evil's kind of that way, but there are times when it's just really apparent. And what I mean by that is, like in World War II, when Corrie ten Boom's family they were watchmakers. So they're like jewelers. They ran a business and did, that's how they made their living, had a nice, decent house, good family and everything, lived in Holland. And then the Nazis came in and took them over and were occupying these areas. And, it was a bad thing, but it wasn't like it was concentration camp bad at this point. But then they start seeing that there's Jews that are kind of leaving town, and Jews that are disappearing, friends of theirs, people that they knew, and they just kind of mysteriously, went away. Probably just announced it kind of like they committed suicide and disappeared. We buried them. This was going on all around them, and they decided they couldn't put up with it anymore. And so was that an easy thing to do, or was it a difficult thing to do? So for them, they had to sit down and have a discussion in their family, and they had to say, we're going to risk everything, our lives, our money, our, the jobs that we have, making, doing watch repairs and all of the things, the wonderful life that we have, whether it is the meals that we have and going places and traveling and, church and all of the wonderful stuff. We're going to have to risk all of that. And what it's going to entail is we're going to have to secretly build a room in our house where we can house people. And we're going to start doing the Underground Railroad kind of deal. And we're going to start smuggling human beings, people, Jews, Jewish supporters. We're going to smuggle them out of Holland, out of Europe, and get them somewhere like the U.S., Canada, somewhere, other places around the world where they would be safe. And we're going to pretend, we're going to put on a good face, and we're going to secretly do this, and we're going to put on a show, and this is a ruse, it is a deception, and we're going to hide these people in our house, and we're going to get them out when we can, and we're going to do this as many times as possible and save as many lives as possible. The problem with that is it creates a great deal of stress and strain. You start watching more and more people disappear. You start hearing rumors that they're putting people on boxcars and taking them to other parts of Europe, and that you don't know what happens to them when they get there. But the idea is that they're torturing them, and then they're putting them in gas chambers, and they're killing these people. And so there is an urgency, because you can see, and you're afraid, remember what I said, that God is not going to come and take care of the situation, but that this horrible, terrible evil is going to come and overwhelm us. And so what they decided to do was to stand up in the middle of that and do their best to push back on that evil. and to do good in the face of evil, which is what Peter says to us, what Jesus says to us, overcome evil with good, right? And in the midst of that, they get arrested. And they not only get arrested, they're in lines waiting to get into prison camps, and I mean just temporary holding camps at this point, then put in boxcars. And you're talking about elderly people in her family, and some of them die in the travel getting to the camps. And experiencing all of the terrible things that they did puts you at a place, and this was something that you have to, I'll give you 3 examples. Stoyan, who was arrested in Russia, was a pastor, put in jail. Brother Yoon, who was arrested, put in jail in China for his faith. And then right here, Corrie ten Boom, put in jail in a concentration camp. And in all 3 instances, they had to be horrified. It had to be a depressing situation to watch your family and friends die. It had to be a depressing situation to have to endure the persecution, the threats, the violence, watching women get raped, as Corrie ten Boom mentioned, by the guards that were there. Her barracks was full of fleas, and they were praising God for the fleas because the guards were not willing to rape women in there because they had fleas. All that they had experienced, and in all 3 of those situations, all 3 situations, they all had persecution, they all were beaten, they all were tortured, all of that kind of stuff. And all of that leads to the moments where you lay down underneath the broom tree and you say, Lord, take me home. All 3 lead there. But at the same time, all 3 of those folks walked out of those prison situations, and hundreds of lives were transformed because they had been in there. Every guy in Stoyan's cell block in Russia, where he was put, the gulag that he lived in, all of them were the worst of the worst. And they all came to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior because he was in there and shared his faith with them. And the Holy Spirit moved upon those people. And the whole cell block came to know the Lord. Brother Yoon, every single person in every cell on the floor that he was on all came to know the Lord. Same with Corrie ten Boom. And so we would say, we're getting ready to do a vacation Bible school that says, God is magnified and he is glorified by our actions in the midst of what we're going on. And so one of the things that we go through is standing up in the face of evil. And when we do that, when we stand firm in the power of God, filled with his Holy Spirit, then God is magnified. God is glorified because we are allowing him to work through us, and he accomplishes what he wanted done in the midst of that. And of course, if you watch the movie Dunkirk, you can see God moving upon Hitler's mind and getting him to make poor decisions so that the war shifts and the Allies win the war and defeat not only Germany, but Japan. And in that situation, it's the same as fire coming down from heaven. We watch God do great things. And at the same time, all of that can overwhelm us. All the hard work, it's kind of like at the end, the last night of Vacation Bible School. You're excited how good it's gone. You've had a great time. You met a lot of kids. You saw smiling faces singing about Jesus, and you're ready to go home and fall down. And you're like, Lord, take me home, right? Same as a mission trip, same as all those things. But you saw God glorified. You saw him magnified in the midst of that. And so for us, the idea is to find the things to eat, the place to rest, and find solace in his word, in knowing that, well done, good and faithful servant, that we are doing what he has called us to do. We are fighting the good fight. We're standing up to evil, and we are winning. And in the end, Jesus blows the trumpet and comes back. That's the great hope that is within my heart, in knowing that in the end, we'll all bow before him and give him the praise that he deserves. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed Bible study. God bless you. Have a great week.
Thank you.